all. Welcome to our webinar today. Today, we will talk about one thing and one thing, which is Africa. We have very distinguished guests today, and it will be a privilege for me to introduce them to you. But before that, I would like to highlight a couple of points for you. Even though some people talk about Africa like a country, it consists of more than 50 countries, hosts more than 1.3 billion people. Geographically, Africa is large as China, India, US, Europe combined. Has 40 billionaires. Africa has been growing close to 5% annually in the last 20 years. Has been reducing the poverty year by year, even though it has been facing many challenges from the war, unemployment, HIV, TB, malaria, etc. Africa has shown its strength to fight under very difficult conditions, and I'm sure will do so going forward. Even though some like to marry Africa's name with poverty and full of challenges, as you may have seen before, people like myself and our speakers sees Africa's unmatched potential, and we hope to bring those unmatched potentials to you today. Yes, COVID-19 is a totally different challenge. Depends on which article you read, growth potential has been reduced to between negative territories to -1. Again, expected job losses range between 50 million to 150 million, which is equivalent to 1/3 of its workforce, formal or informal. Even though Africa has shown its resilience against TB, HIV, malaria, but we also need to acknowledge the shortages that it faces regarding hospitals and necessary healthcare system. Therefore, challenges are also in front of us together with opportunities. As mentioned, I'm hoping with my learned friends and colleagues, we will share their wisdom and knowledge with you today. As one of my elders recently shared with me, and I would like to quote, Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, who was one of our leaders after Prophet Muhammad, said, gaining knowledge is greater importance than having wealth. As you protect your wealth, wisdom and knowledge will protect you, unquote. So I hope you will be more wise after today's discussion to create more wealth and have the knowledge to protect yourself from challenges and difficulties you face in your endeavors in Africa. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our president, Mr. Olpak. Mr. Olpak is the president of DEİK, as well as president of DTİK. So I'll request Mr. Olpak to share his thoughts and welcome our panelists as well as our audience to the webinar. Mr. Olpak?
Thank you. Thank you so much also for the introduction, Mr. Salim. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, and dear panelists, as well as my dear friends, Selim Bey and Abu Bakr Bey, I wish a healthy day for all of us. Yes, it's nice to be here in the presence of a group of people, it seems, who care as deeply as we do about the ties between Turkey and the African countries. When we look at during the last 2 decades, first of all, the political trust between Turkey and the African countries has been strengthening, and it seems Turkey has been establishing a powerful partnership, which was upgraded to a strategic partnership of a mutual benefit. It's important and common development. And with this regard, Turkey also sees African diaspora, which is important since now we are in DTİK, a diaspora panel, a key to the continent's development, and thus gives importance to cooperation on trading and exchanging experience on economic trends, business opportunities, and development priorities for Africa. Just to give you an example, late last month, we had a video meeting together with our Minister of Trade, with our 45 chairpersons of Turkey-Africa Business Councils. By the way, Africa has 54 countries, and we have 45 business councils as DEİK in Africa. I think that's remarkable. We discussed the strategies to promote trade and investment with the continent, such as regional logistics centers in Africa, free trade agreements with the countries and regional economic communities, developing correspondent banking relationships, and contributing to infrastructure projects for AfCFTA. Now, Turkey is very keen on sharing know-how and promoting integration. This is also important. New partnerships between Turkish and Africa diaspora may unlock more value in Africa and increase the share of participation of the countries by exploring and developing joint projects in trade, capacity building, health, infrastructure, energy, and connectivity. I also believe synergized efforts may achieve food security and healthcare in Africa and promote skill development. As you just mentioned, Salim Bey, as president of board DEİK and DTİK, let me give a brief introduction about our organization. DEİK is a business platform that has been continuing its activities on a voluntary-based membership for 35 years for private sector. In order to enhance investment and trade between Turkey and the other countries, we continue our works with an understanding of business diplomacy. We have 146 country-to-country based business councils all over the world, and DTİK, this is one of the special purpose business councils of them for our Turkish diaspora and friends of Turkish diaspora. DTİK also, of course, operates under the umbrella of DEİK, and our mission is to create a network and coordination between Turkish diaspora and friends of Turkey all over the world. By the way, DTİK members are business people as well as academicians, sportsmen, artists, professionals, of course, sportswomen, and NGOs all around the world. As DTİK, we have an inclusive approach. That means we are open for everyone, for all ideas, ethnic bases, and even religions for the friends of Turkey. We believe that makes us stronger. I hope this meeting also will give an insight for what can be achieved together as two strong diasporas. When I say two, of course, I mean the whole African continent. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Before I go to our distinguished guests, Mr. President, I would like to raise a question to you. Then I'll go and engage with our other guests. I mean, as you have been managing DEİK, which is quite a large business organization that has 146 active business councils and holding regular meetings, with some of them I also attended, I would like to get your feel that what are the most affected and set to outperform industries due to COVID and also after COVID, in your own opinion?
Okay, to be able to answer the question, I must give some brief information. So what we are doing, how we came to this point, how I got the information. As our organization during this pandemic, we had an understanding of saying we are not suspending our work. We are not shutting down our business. Of course, our health is the most important thing in our life, yes, and this is our priority, so we should take care all the necessary steps to prevent the pandemic. But we should also consider the health of our companies and as well as care of the people we are working together in the companies. And I believe this was the best method to save their lives and their jobs, our lives and our jobs. What we have done so far, why we did it, And what is the result? Yes, this is the new digital life, I believe. Daily, just to give you an example, I am spending 8 to 10 hours on average for video conferences and meetings. Yesterday, we had the board meeting of DEİK, and my friends just told us that during the last 2.5 months' time, we had 346 video conferences or webinars. So that is from one point crazy, but on the other side, this is the benefit. Normally, it is unbelievable. Even we couldn't do a quarter of it. That, I mean, our activities goes on with our business council members, with ambassadors, trade missions, and time to time with our ministers. That seems we, and I believe all the world, actually working harder than ever. When we started this new life, this new normal or whatever it is, honestly speaking, we were anxious in the beginning. We spoke about that a lot during the first video meetings. Then, of course, we went on discussing the issues and the problems on production, supply chains, customs, finance, personal protection equipments, whatever it is. But we also discussed possible solutions in those meetings. Networking and information sharing enabled us to convey those information immediately with the authorities, with the ministries, and in many cases, directly with the ministers themselves. And this is also very important. Once the solution is found, an immediate and effective action follows. This means not only weathering the storm, but also seizing the opportunities that grow from it. It is also going on for our DTİK activities. Now, if I comes to the sectors which you just asked, let me give you a brief summary of the economic situation by sector in general. Manufacturing. In Turkey, after 5 quarters of uninterrupted growth, production has been decreasing since by mid of March, following a fall in domestic and foreign demand, but a recovery started in May. Automotive, textile, and mining industries have been also affected, but pharmaceutical, agricultural, and food industries have successfully maintained their activities. When we come to distribution, in order to curb the spread of the virus, 70% of shops were closed for nearly 2 months. Many consumers, especially in big cities, have turned to online purchases. Big chains have tripled their home deliveries. Now they also started daily life. Tourism, the sector, as we all know, in Turkey represents 13% of Turkey's GDP, is another inevitable victim of the pandemic. However, we are expecting a rebound since the government has eased restrictions starting from June. We will see all the results later on. If we speak about infrastructure, projects have continued, just like maybe the participants know that Çanakkale Bridge or Northern Marmara Motorway or the others. Even some projects have been speeded up to support the fight against COVID, such as our new hospitals. Logistics and transport, this is very important. I believe that logistics never stopped as it was afraid. If it had been stopped, that will be a real catastrophe. Some unbelievable methods have been developed to maintain the logistics chain since majority of companies continued their activities. As we can see, while some sectors, such as shops and tourism, have been hit hard by the pandemic, most industries have resisted well and strive to maintain production. This puts our business in a strong position to recover quickly as the virus comes under control. Finally, it is hard to define which sectors will be the leader after COVID-19, but what I believe is the one who guaranteed the supply chain and got the confidence of their counterpart during this pandemic will certainly be the winner. And I wish and I believe we will all be together the winners. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. As we noted that, in your opinion, supply chain management always been important, but it's going to be more and more important going forward due to the challenges we're facing as started with COVID pandemic and around the world. Thank you so much again. Appreciate it. I would like to now introduce our first South African panelist, a formidable powerhouse who has left a mark in the African continent. Our chairman of South Africa's Massmart Holding. He is also a chairman of JSE-listed Aspen Pharmaceutical Holding. He is the former chief executive officer of Old Mutual. Old Mutual is similar to Sanlam for those who doesn't know, and under management they have plus minus $40 billion. Currently, Massmart Holding operates in 13 sub-Saharan countries with 443 stores and with a staff complement of 45,000 employees. Mr. Husseini Dilamini, welcome to our discussion.
Thank you very much, Salim. It's a great honor and privilege to be part of such a very important discussion with very important colleagues that I highly respect.
Thank you so much, Mr. Husseini. Mr. Husseini, before I raise my question, I would also mention to our audience that you were named as the young leader or young global leader in 2008 by the World Economic Forum. And as we can see, you're still young, so you will carry on being the young global leader going forward.
I wish indeed.
Thank you so much for joining us. I would like to actually follow Mr. President's points as he talked about supply chain. And since you manage Massmart, supply chain management is quite crucial part of your business, as understandably. What we have seen around the world, same apply in Africa, COVID-19 has been impacting badly supply chains in and around the world, including Africa. So how would that impact import versus local production in Africa after COVID, in your opinion?
Thank you very much indeed, Salim. That's a very important question, which has become so crucial and critical in the light of the COVID-19 challenge. One of the things that the COVID-19 challenge has made us realize in Africa in particular is the extent to which our supply chains are fragile and vulnerable, and that in times of pandemics such as COVID-19, they are found wanting in the sense that it's very difficult for them to cope. That's in particular when it comes to medical supplies, pharmaceutical products, and personal protective equipment. That's the area where Africa is lacking and is weak. And that's linked to the fact that the manufacturing base in Africa is not that strong. Whether you look at telecoms, you look at automobiles, you look at the aviation sector, you look at the logistics sector that Mr. Opak was talking about, and you look at infrastructure, you look at energy, you look across the piece. So this is a wake-up call for industrial policymakers in Africa to come with industrial strategies that are going to strengthen the efficacy and robustness of African supply chains. Having said that, on the food side,
did we lose Mr. Hussein? Apologies, Mr. Hussein, we lost you for a second.
On the food side, it's encouraging that Africa has got very robust supply chains that in the context of South Africa, for example, we saw a lot of panic buying, a lot of stockpiling during the onset of the crisis, but we were out there to assure people that we've got very robust and efficacious supply chains that will ensure that the shelves are full of food. Indeed, the shelves never ran out of food because we managed the value chains in a very robust way, in a way that is efficient, and we can manage food supply lines from the farm to the fork, as it were. So it's a mixed bag in the final analysis.
But just if we could stay on this point, Kuseni, I mean, we also talking about African Free Trade Agreement in Africa, which was going to come in force from June, July this year, but it has been postponed now. When you look at even from that point of view, how are you going to make sure that sustainable supply remains in Africa? Is your policy to support more Africa's productions, or will you be open to still commercial balancing between Africa's production versus overseas supply, which would be quite crucial for our audience that maybe want to supply goods into Africa as well?
So I think there are three things to note about the impact of COVID on supply chains, which it imposes on companies. You have to now start rethinking your reliance on your sources of supply. Historically, in the context of globalization, China became the factory of the world, and every company or retailer sourced as much as possible from China. And now, with the disruption of global supply chains caused by the pandemic, obviously the strategy of relying on one source of supply is questionable, won't be sustainable going forward. Then the second thing is to really start looking at certain product lines that need to be localized. And Africa has got to grapple and engage with the challenge quite seriously. And there is a strong argument to be made, and that this creates opportunities for investors from Turkey, for example, to start looking at industries and sectors that policymakers would be targeting and prioritizing, and look for creative partnerships with African entrepreneurs to build capacity right in Africa to manufacture certain goods that are currently not manufactured in Africa. And thirdly, from a risk management point of view, there is a case to be made to diversify your exposure, not to rely on one source of supply, whether it's relying at home or relying on China, but you now have to look at multiple locations. In the context of retail, it may be sensible that certain goods must be located in West Africa, some East Africa, some maybe Southern Africa, some maybe North Africa. So there is some scenario planning and strategic analysis that need to be made in that regard, so that you come up with a very sustainable strategy.
Thank you so much, Hussein. I appreciate it. I'll come back to you. I would like to now introduce our next speaker, which is Mr. Selim Bora. Selim is the chairman of Sumo Group. A group was ranked within the top 225 international construction companies by Engineering News Report, which is a prominent publication. Today, Sumo has diversified business interests and operation in BOT airports, hospitals, shopping malls, hotels, and similar infrastructure projects as an investor or EPC contractor globally. For the last 9 years, Sumo operates in several sub-Saharan African countries. If I could name them: Equatorial Guinea, Senegal, Rwanda, Congo, Brazzaville, and Niger or Benin. Welcome, Selim, to our webinar.
Thank you so much, Abubakir.
Selim, I would like to, of course, take from where Kuseni left to talk about how could Africa develop, because Africa can only develop if it develops its infrastructure. And when we look at Africa's infrastructure needs, according to AFDB, Africa needs to spend between $130 to $170 billion per annum to develop its infrastructure to the acceptable level. And as Sumo, you play quite an important role in that regard. So how does Turkish business, especially in infrastructure and construction sector, should position themselves in Africa's growth trajectory after COVID, considering that there is such a high need of investment in Africa in the different regions?
Thank you for this wonderful webinar, and I would like to welcome all participants and my respects. Recently, of course, being at homes and not being able to move as frequently as we used to made us indeed participate a lot of webinars. And One of my favorite word recently is the combination of global and local, glocalization. So I really like that word because people realize that, as Mr. Husseini said, no more one source dependence. It seems like maximizing the local resources is going to be the key for success, especially for African countries. And I truly believe that the solution for Africa is in the hand of the Africans. The Turkish business has been, it's actually, the continent is new for Turkish business, you know, because in the vicinity of Turkey, we have always been in traditional markets in the Middle East, ex-Soviet republics, little bit of Eastern Europe, Gulf countries, Northern Africa in terms of Libya and adjacent countries were the traditional markets for Turkish construction and investment activities. After 2010, actually, Sub-Saharan Africa became a new market to discover. And our company, in 8 years of time, in 5 different countries, managed to realize 18 projects on turnkey basis. And we have been, as you mentioned, in very different African countries with different cultures and locations. It's very interesting. I usually ask this question in the panels and ask myself all the time. For instance, a country like Niger, one of the least developed countries. Why is it the least developed country? When you look at their resources, they have only 3 resources: oil, gold, and uranium. A country having only these 3 resources, how can be the least developed country of the world? This question must be remembered. This question must be answered. And there is a very bizarre situation all over those years. You know, we were the newcomers to the continent, and only our company managed to invest 200 million euros in 2 BOT projects in the capital of Niger. So when you look at the money circulating around the world, you know, excess of liquidity and everything else, why and how come that money is not coming to Africa? That must be answered. And Turkey, being positioned in such an important geographical location, has a lot of things to export because of the manufacturing capacity, power, ability. But more than that, Turkey has a very big export item, which is the know-how and investment background, especially in PPP projects. I see the future of Africa holding hand in hand with our African partners in the PPP projects. And that's where the insurance companies play the biggest role. I think this floor will be taken by Mr. Junior later on. But really, we really don't need a big formulas to reach the success. I think if there is a right insurance platform, Turkish investors will willingly go to Africa and develop their BOT and PPP projects, provided that the collectibles over the time shall be guaranteed by certain insurance companies and platforms. So I believe that these are the basics, and OECD rules must be changed a bit to allow flexible access of the funds to the continent, and efficiency is the most important thing. Countries must choose their right partners. Fast track approach is very important because there is no time to lose anymore. So this gap should be recovered as soon as possible by the right partners. And we believe that Turkish business is the right partner for African countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. So we have noted the question as why that money is not coming to Africa. So hopefully we will find the answer during this webinar. And also we noted your comment about a right insurance platform, as Sanlam is one of the largest insurance company in Africa as well as in the world. I'm sure Junior will assist us to get a feel about that as well. But before I go to Junior, I would like to introduce him to our audience. Our next speaker is, as we mentioned, Junior John Ngulele. He is a remarkable force and astute businessman who has accomplished numerous strides throughout his career within the African continent. As we mentioned, he is currently vice chairman of Sanlam Pan Africa. He runs Sanlam Pan Africa for a number of years and managed quite a bit of success as the CEO. Currently, this giant company manages more than $23 billion in assets under management. They have a direct presence in 11 African countries and provide employment over 103,000 employees. Welcome, Junior, to our webinar. Have I lost Junior somehow? I think he may, yes, I think he may be fallen. While we're waiting for Junior, I'll go to, for my next question to Kuseni, then we will come back to Junior when he managed to come back to join us. Kuseni, I mean, I guess we could argue that you are in a way, very lucky person because you manage a company that who is in the retail sector, and as Mr. Olpak mentioned, that a retail sector is doing well. Also, you manage a pharmaceutical company, Aspen Pharmaceutical, which also during the COVID has been doing quite a great job. But as you know, everybody talks about how COVID has changed our buying habits. We all forced to move from going to shop to buy things to go online and purchase things from online companies, even when we're coming to buy a product from the mass mart. How does change has been impacting mass mart businesses, as well as how are you planning to deal with this change going forward in your businesses?
That's a great question. There's a lot of disruption that's happening in retail. It precedes the COVID-19 pandemic, and we were already starting to develop our online retail operations and capabilities. We rather pivot towards omni-channel rather than just say e-commerce or online. So we've invested quite a lot, and we made some acquisitions of startups in that space, and we're on the lookout for partners. I like the word of public-private partnerships that Salim was talking about, but in the commercial space as well, it is about partnerships, especially if you are to innovate and come up with the offerings that work for your customers. Here in South Africa, in fact, even across the continent, we've entered into partnerships with a number of players in the e-commerce space. We entered into a partnership with Uber Eats in South Africa. For example, our customers can just go to the Uber Eats platform and access the products, the many products that we have in our stores, and order them through the platform and have those products delivered on their doorsteps. We also this week announced a new partnership with a company called OneCart. It's one of the startups in the e-commerce space, and it also enables customers to use their app to be able to access products from any of our stores and get those products to be delivered. During the time of COVID and lockdowns across different markets in Africa, we also enabled our customers to be able to WhatsApp any of our stores, send a WhatsApp message to any of our stores, get a quotation, and order the product, pay for the product using mobile money, using M-Pesa in East Africa, or using EFT to make the payments, and they can either go and collect the product from the store or get it delivered on their doorsteps. So it's an area that requires continuous innovation. Why do we do that? Because our mission is to help our customers save money and time so that they can live better. We are here to serve. Our customers are leaders. We are here to serve our customers. We have to make sure we offer them convenience. We understand their needs. We understand their concerns. We also understand their insights in terms of how they want to be served, and making sure that we are ahead of that.
But Hussein, will you going to open up more retail shops, or will you be investing more your online presence? What is the strategy going forward?
So in the ultimate analysis, people like to talk about online retail and offline retail. They like to talk about bricks and mortar, talk about e-commerce. We believe that in the final analysis, it's not either or, it's end-to-end. It's a hybrid model. It's an omni-channel. We find that our stores themselves lend themselves, because we have a footprint that is spread far and wide, lend themselves being closer to customers. Therefore, from an e-commerce point of view, we can compete that much better than some of the pure play e-commerce retailers. So we're trying to be smart about it, trying to be very flexible about it, trying to also be on the lookout for new innovations coming from youngsters. I mean, the talk of kids in the garage, always coming up with new innovations that are going to disrupt and change the way in which we live, the way in which we shop. Those are things that we're always on the lookout for. Of course, now with COVID-19, one of the immediate impacts is that people are very careful about going to stores in the traditional sense that they used to. So online is growing. We have seen a massive spike in online sales since the lockdowns were implemented. And we see the trend continuing. And also elsewhere in Africa, there are a lot of open markets, as you know. During the lockdown situation or periods, a lot of those open markets were closed. And then people moved to formal retail outlets. And we see the trend continuing as well, because the formal retail outlets, they provide health and safety, they provide social distancing, they adhere to all the protocols that are required to prevent people from being infected by the COVID-19 virus. And they provide quality. What we seek to do as a retailer is in every market where we operate, to your point, we seek to partner with local suppliers. We want to open our supply chain, our value chain, to local suppliers, and we want them to walk all the way with us. Being part of Walmart operates in 27 countries so in the world. We say to any of our supply in Africa, we are not just limited to supplying us in our stores in Africa. If your product is of the good quality, right price, and you can provide us with the right quantities on a consistent basis, there's no reason why we cannot open opportunities for you to supply Walmart in the USA, supply Asda in the UK. Asda is owned by Walmart. Walmart is big in Canada. Walmart is in Asia and everywhere. So that's the value proposition that we offer. The other issue is the issue of local talent, Salim, which is so important in Africa. We invest a lot. Over 95% of our operations across Africa, they are run and managed by locals. We don't believe in sending expatriates. We believe in investing in developing local skills, local talent, up to managerial level to be able to run and operate our operations across the continent. And for us, that's a strategic imperative. It's not because it looks good, it's good PR, but because it makes business sense for us. We want people to be better off for us being an investor in their economies and communities and societies.
Thank you so much, Hussein. Really appreciate it. I would like to now go to Junior. Junior, I'm sure when you heard Selim mentioned right insurance platform, you decided to run away.
I'm sorry about that. This is the challenges of the new ways of working.
Welcome back, Junior. For those who doesn't know Junior, I'm sure has been to every African countries at least twice or three times. He has been working in Africa over 30 years. I'll not say 40 to give away his age. So therefore, he has a very wide experience in many countries. Junior, I mean, as you heard from Selim, I would like to combine that with a question that I was going to raise anyhow. With the COVID change, the insurance becomes a much more important tool for many businesses.
Yeah.
Because it's all about security per se. And Sanlam is a very large company in Africa to deal with insurance challenges historically and insurance challenges going forward. Yes, you bought a very large Moroccan business recently, over $1 billion, and I saw in the media last week you bought a Nigerian business from FNB. So your footprint is expanding, especially in areas that what we could consider west and north, that Turkish businesses is quite active. So without putting you on the spot, how do you see economic viability of investing in, especially in these regions, countries? And as Sanlam, what type of insurance tools that you guys may come up after COVID that people like Mr. Selim and others who is in the infrastructure and construction industries could be interested of utilizing? Over to you.
Yes, thank you for the introduction, Salim. Just a bit of background. Yes, I've been doing business on the continent for well over 30 years. I've visited most of the countries. And even with that, I must admit, I'm still learning quite a bit about the continent. It is large, it is complex, and it is not easy to get one's head around, but one has to keep going at it. If you look at Sanlam's position on the continent, we started our geographic diversification in 2004. And prior to that, our group was largely a South African-based insurance group. Having been formed in 1918, we are over 100 years old. And the decision to diversify geographically was made with a view to stabilize our earnings streams away from South Africa and India, Malaysia were one of the first areas we went into. And more recently, we prioritized geographic diversification on the African continent. And most of it was achieved by acquisition. We also started a number of greenfield operations. The company in Nigeria, FBN Life that you mentioned, we just acquired the balance of 65% in it. We now own it 100%. It started as a greenfield operation. Why this geographic expansion? Firstly, we believe in Africa. It's a commitment to grow with the continent of Africa. It finds us now in 33 countries. What do we do in those 33 countries? We are, in the first instance, there to support the growth of those economies by providing our products, by providing and sharing our expertise. We also work with local partners as Sanlam. One of our philosophies is we know something about running an insurance business, but we can never claim to know this continent, big as it is. So in every operation or every country, we have local partners who help us understand the local nuances, are invested in the business. We employ local management. It's a win-win partnership. That's the model that we work with. Now, coming to the products themselves and why in 33 countries per se, one of the things that we find works in our strategy is being in 33 countries makes us the ideal partner for multinational companies who are active in several countries on the continent. So if you have a business in 5, 6, 7, 20 countries on the continent, and you need short-term insurance, whether it's for your infrastructure projects or your typical asset all risk for corporates, or even life and health and pensions for your employees, you have the possibility to deal with one insurance group that can create solutions for you across this footprint of 33 countries. So we see our positioning firstly to serve the local countries, and secondly to use our platform or ecosystem, let's call it, to support our multinational partners. the impact of COVID on our business. In the health space, employees or clients who have our policies, when they fall sick with COVID or any other sickness for that matter, they are protected. If a business is infected with COVID and the business has to close for a few days, for a week, to clean up and disinfect, if they had a policy that includes the business interruption extension, they are protected. So these are some of the policies that we have for our clients across the continent. But I think I would underline our ability to service multinational corporates across 33 countries on the continent.
Thank you so much, Junior. Before I go back to our other colleagues, I just want to carry on from where you left. I mean, as you correctly alluded, Africa is quite wide, and we're looking at more than 50 countries. As I recall, some of even our conversation when I said we're thinking about opening up an office in East Africa, which country should we open up? So each country has its own dynamics. And unless you're there and unless you have local expertise to work with you and manage your businesses, and I think that's one of your advice to our audience when they come to Africa, depends on which country that they come, they should look at somehow partnering local businesses, and they should look at somehow managing their businesses through local expertise, if I hear you correctly.
Yes. One of the, let me say, learnings that we have acquired over the years, and also myself personally. Africa, yes, 54 countries. Each one of those is very different from the next. Yes, we do group them sometimes into regional trading blocks. We talk of ECOWAS, we talk of SADC, we talk of the East African Community. That's for ease of understanding and grouping them together. But even within that, each country is very unique. And as a business person coming from outside, we have our own ways of doing business in South Africa. And what you quickly learn when you start to do business on the continent is what works in South Africa does not necessarily work in each of those countries. And indeed, what works in Kenya does not necessarily work in Tanzania. So how do you operate and succeed in 54 countries, or 33 in our case? Our philosophy is we go in, we try and understand each country, the nuances, the business environment, and then with the help of a local partner, we then tailor our business to what works in that country, not to come with a template. If an agent gets upfront commissions in that country, we're not going to come in and introduce a different way of paying commissions, pay as you go. That's how we would look. And then you need to look at the needs of each specific country in terms of products. Even within that country, you also need to segment the clientele and tailor products to even sub-segments in that country. And that you can do better when you have a local person to hold your hand and guide you, a person who you trust, with whom you share the same values, that is absolutely critical, the same governance standards, that is absolutely critical, and then together you can succeed. That's the formula that it works for us. I'm sure if others want to try it, they could also try that. It's a win-win formula.
It's a win-win formula, and as Turkey, as our president says all the time to us, we must do everything in a way that we create a win-win platforms. So yes, we will follow your suggestion in that regard as well. Junior, please don't go anywhere. I'll come back to you, but let me first ask another question to Mr. Selim. Selim, as you mentioned, that insurance or the right insurance platform is quite critical for doing more businesses in Africa, especially after COVID. I guess we could comfortably say a capital raise has been a challenge in Africa. So it's not a new challenge as we look at today. But quite likely after COVID, it could be a bigger challenge to raise capital for Africa's projects. So in your opinion, Selim, what are the financing options and measures for Africa's or Turkish private sector to save and revive their businesses going forward in Africa?
Actually, we have been experiencing some models with some financial institutions. For instance, Turkish Exim Bank has played a big role in financing a lot of projects throughout Africa. But besides that, there is Afrexim Bank, based in Egypt, as you know, is a very active player. Trade Development Bank, African Development Bank, African Trade Insurance Arm, Africa 50 Fund. These are all very active players, and yet the resources have not been utilized to a satisfactory level, because the problem is actually the financial institutions are looking for the right projects. The investors or developers are looking for the financing. Governments are trying to balance these needs with respect to the IMF regulations. OECD is putting their own rules and regulations. So it's like you have to balance a lot of things at the same time. But the critical and essential thing is that the project must be, first of all, feasible, and the developer or the partner in charge should be the right partner with readiness, willingness, and performance-based capability. So these are a combination of things. But I mean, for Turkish business, essential is, rather than finding the financial institutions, it's, I think, the guarantees, availability, payments, regularity, and comfort in a way. So if, I mean, the insurance companies can be flexible in terms of supporting the projects, I believe Turkish entrepreneurs can do a lot of things and realize a lot of projects in Africa. So we need more encouragement, actually, and governments, because are ready to hold hand in hand, but we are always missing this insurance part, which would facilitate the life for everybody. So basically, that's it.
Thank you so much. I would like to raise this question to Junior and Kuseni as well. So let's just pick up your opinion. Let's start with Kuseni, and then I'll finalize with Junior. Kuseni, in your opinion, capital raise for projects, whether they are infrastructure or construction or road projects, has been a challenge in Africa, which I'm sure you have seen many of those challenges. How do you see that after COVID?
Yeah, I think Mr. Selim has made very important points, and I agree with him in what he's made. There's usually a mismatch between the projects that are looking for financing and the finance solutions that are looking for projects. In my view, one of the problems is the lack of skills to take projects to bankability stage. I have a different view in terms of capital. That I hold the view that, from my experience in doing business in Africa, which stretches from the mining industry, financial services, now to retail and pharmaceuticals, capital has never been the constraint, and it is not today. My major constraint as a retailer in Africa, I would say, it's access to real estate, and it's the logistics challenges, it's the infrastructure deficit that Mr. Selim has spoken about, which I fully agree, efficiency in ports and clearing customs, and really the whole ecosystem of intra-regional trade, which I hope the African Continental Free Trade Area will be able to resolve. So it's really a mosaic of issues, and that needs to be analyzed and unpacked and addressed in ways that are very effective and efficient going forward. I think there is enough capital in the world for the right projects. I think projects have to make themselves commercially compelling. And the problem, a lot of the projects in Africa, especially on the infrastructure side, they just take forever to come across the line and to mature. And you find there's a lot of bureaucratic red tape, got different consultants flying in from North America, from Europe, from China now, from everywhere. I like the point that was made earlier on, I think it was made by Mr. Opak and Mr. Selim, that really the issue going forward is PPPs in Africa. I mean, you look at the historical legacy of colonialism. When the Brits and the French came in, they were just, it was where winner takes all kind of looting spree in Africa. China is now in. China is also coming in to sort of pursue its national economic interest, but without necessarily partnering and giving value to locals. I like what I'm hearing about Turkish business people wanting to look at opportunities to partner with Africans. I think that's the model going forward, where there's partnership, there's shared value being created, and there's also long-term development and modernization of industries, of infrastructure. Africa has the potential to be a first world continent within a generation. Like, I mean, South Korea in the 50s was in the same level as countries like Uganda and Ghana. I mean, today it's a first world country, simply because the authorities there, they pursued the right policies and they were decisive, they were bold, there was leadership, and that's what Africa needs today.
Thank you so much, Kuseni. I mean, Junior heard the comments from Selim and Kuseni. So as Kuseni said, capital never a challenge, but he believes skill to bring the project to bankability levels are the challenges, Junior. And Selim mentioned again that also insurance is a challenge in that regard. What are your thoughts, Junior?
Yes, thank you very much. I certainly do agree that there are a lot of potential projects that have been put on the table, but bringing them to bankability has been a challenge. I know some international finance organizations have even put aside grants to finance the preparation of these projects to bring them to bankability with a mixed success. In terms of the role of insurance, as you know, Salim, I spent the first 28 years of my career working in the reinsurance sector, heading up one of the world's largest reinsurance companies on the continent. And as a reinsurer, we played a central role in preparing and designing various coverages, particularly for infrastructure projects. If you look at, if I were to mention a number of hydropower projects in Uganda, in Ethiopia, all 3-4 in Ethiopia, we were involved in their reinsurance and insurance with the various partners. And one of the hallmarks of the success of the insurance and reinsurance of those projects was that we were at the table together with the project owners, the promoters, the funders, and the insurers right from the get-go. By the time the project is submitted for funding, insurance is already wrapped in, and it also helps to de-risk the project, so that by the time you go to the financiers, you are presenting them a full package, including how the risk will be mitigated through insurance and reinsurance with full capacity from the world's leading reinsurers. Those projects tend to be easier or more convincing, let me say, to the funding community. The typical approach, unfortunately, is the project is conceptualized, there's a project sponsor, it goes to the financiers, and then there is a tender process, there is a contractor, and only then insurance starts being discussed. And sometimes that forces the whole conversation to go back to the design stage even. When the insurance and reinsurance engineers look at the project, they then give their input at that later stage, or if there's no agreement, it affects the pricing and the structure of the insurance and reinsurance. So
I think Mr. Junior has frozen, if I hear.
all your risk mitigating measures.
Oh, sorry, Junior, we lost you for a second, and I think you were going to say a very important thing. You said, I think you were going to describe how the businesses should be dealing with the project steps. If you could take it from there, if you don't mind.
So I was going to say, my thinking is, or what I've seen work on the ground with the successful, even mega projects, is right from the beginning to involve the insurers and their reinsurance partners at the design stage of the project, so that by the time it goes through the financing stages, the risk element has already been addressed and it has been de-risked. It also helps from a pricing point of view. Definitely, one should expect to pay less in terms of rates for a very well de-risked project. And this we've seen in a number of projects that we've been involved in. And as a group, we have an engineering insurance entity called Mirabilis that focuses only on engineering in South Africa and the continent with the necessary engineering skills and what have you. We have a reinsurance entity within our group, but we also work with the international reinsurance market. So we are able to put a package that includes reinsurance capacity to support a project of any size.
It's quite interesting to hear you, Junior. Firstly, you're saying what you do last in an infrastructure and construction project, do first and make your process much more smooth going forward, if I understand you correctly.
Absolutely, Salmo. What I'm saying is your risk management should be dealt with upfront in the project, not at the end, which tends to be the case. And this formula I've seen work practically.
Thank you so much, Junior. Really appreciate it. Considering the time also, I would like to get going to some other question. And if our audience has questions, please write into the question and answer section. Then, of course, we will try to deal with them as well. As I would like to ask the next question to both Junior and Kuseni. I'll try to not to put you guys on the spot, but if you guys could assist me, I'll appreciate it. As you guys, I guess some of our Turkish businesses, like the one that Mr. Selim runs, works in Africa and knows Africa quite well, but some others are learning Africa. They're trying to understand how to do business in Africa. And when they look at it, it says, you mentioned 54 countries. So they say, so where should we go first? So considering how the countries has been responding to COVID and how you guys see their responses and impacts from especially the countries that you guys operate point of view, which 3 or 5 countries that you guys feel or see that will be performing much better after COVID? Let's start with Junior and then let's go to Kuseni.
Thank you very much, Salim. You really did put us in the spot there. My sense is to rather look at a region or regions and say, post-COVID, which regions appear like they'll come out much better. My sense, I see 2 regions, Francophone West Africa, firstly, for a number of reasons. It's a big group. of countries with almost 400 million people in terms of population, almost 800 million US dollars in terms of combined GDPs. But more importantly, as a region, they've been more organized. For example, they've got one currency, which makes trading easier. For us as insurers, they have one insurance regulation code, which applies to all the countries. Again, that makes it easier to deal in the region. And then within that, you look at economies like Ivory Coast, like Senegal. If you look at their performance in terms of GDP over the years, it's been very good. Even when they've had challenges, I look at the Ivory Coast, for example, a few years back, they have shown the resilience and the ability to bounce back quite quickly. And it also says to me, post-COVID, I expect to see that kind of resilience and that ability to bounce back quickly. I would also look at East Africa, the East African community, with Kenya being the main player or the big one there. Again, it's a very integrated region. It's been for quite some time, and it might not be evident to many people, but they all have one language in common, which is Swahili.
Again, I think we lost Junior.
Yeah, I'll get just
French.
Easy.
And
Junior is back.
As a region together for quite some time. So it is very well integrated with stronger efforts to integrate their infrastructure, the standard railway gauge in Kenya from Mombasa to Nairobi, which is intended to be increased to the rest of the region if they come to terms. Again, I see that region as probably going to bounce back a lot quicker on the back of a strong Kenyan market. So I pick two regions.
We lost you for some time. Maybe you mentioned something we missed. In the East African side, you mentioned Kenya. I don't know if you mentioned any other country, Junior.
So in the East African region, I mentioned Kenya as the main, the dominant economy, but then you've got your Tanzania, Uganda. Combined, I think they make an interesting investment proposition because they've got a history of being integrated economically. And this integration is growing.
I mean, you may not like these questions, but I'm going to ask. You're quite active in North Africa, Junior. And as you would guess, because of the religion's resemblance and our relationship with that region, Turkish businesses are doing lots of businesses in North Africa, from Morocco to Egypt to Algeria and so on and so forth.
Yes.
You may not go into by country, but how do you guys as an insurance company seize that region, considering Libya and other challenges and so on and so forth?
As an insurance group, we are new in the North African region. We really entered in 2018 with the acquisition of Saham, which was already active in North Africa and the Middle East. That's our introduction to the region. If I look at Morocco itself, in the region, it's a powerful economy, very strong. For example, the leading world supplier of phosphates, fish, very strong in the manufacturing, particularly the motor vehicle original parts manufacturing for various European models. In the electronic space, a fairly well diversified economy, a very strong agricultural base. But more importantly, we see Morocco as an ideal base to be located in, particularly the Casablanca financial center. It offers many advantages as a head office or regional head office for many multinationals. So our presence in Morocco serves as a base to support our businesses from. We are not active in many of the others to the same extent. So my comment would be limited to Morocco, where we are very happy.
Thank you so much, Junior. Mr. Kuseni?
I would agree with my colleague Junior in terms of the points that he's made and the views that he's expressed on the different countries. I'll also add Ethiopia and Rwanda, and I'll also add Egypt, and I'll also add South Africa as a country that is going to emerge very strongly. My view is in that the African authorities have been very bold and decisive in responding to COVID-19, and the leadership that they've shown and building on the experience of dealing with the Ebola virus, which inflicted or affected Africa in 2014. I think that has put Africa in good stead. And of course, we have, let's not forget, we also have the long-standing challenge of HIV/AIDS, which also has really helped Africa to have the experience that is required to deal with such pandemics, and has done very well. And I think the key thing is really how the recovery and rebuilding process is orchestrated. There will be a need for much more decisive action in terms of creating an enabling environment for the private sector to emerge, flourish, and grow and create value for generations. If you look globally, most of the countries that have done relatively well are those that have got very strong private sector players in their economy. And again, China's response is also, look at Alibaba, the role that Jack Ma has played, and a lot of Chinese corporates, Tencent and others. I mean, there's a case for Africa to think long and hard about top-tier global flagship companies that are going to be world beaters in every sector. There must be a global champion, African champion in every sector that can take on the best of the best on Wall Street, in the FTSE 100, in Asia and elsewhere. To me, without the private sector, Africa will remain weak. And when the next pandemic hits, we will not be prepared to deal with it. We need a very strong, robust, dynamic private sector. And we can do that in partnership with the techish private sector, which is why I'm very excited to be part of this conversation today, because Tech has got some of the most outstanding entrepreneurs, great intellectual capital, world-class manufacturing expertise and capabilities, which I think can be transported and adapted in the African economic space.
Thank you so much, Hussein. I really appreciate it. Our last 15 minutes, I'll quickly go to Selim. And Selim, there are some questions that coming from the audience as well, so I'll try to marry them with one of my questions. So as our audience asks to say, Suma has been quite successful when they look at your Africa operations, and they wonder, considering the Chinese construction firms quite active and they dominate Africa. I mean, of course, this question is not only related to Suma, because we have other construction companies has been winning several tenders in Africa. They wonder, what is the unique success factor? How did we manage to win these projects and tenders in Africa, considering the Chinese impact in Africa?
Thank you for the question. Actually, we are very concentrated in what we are doing. This is number one. I personally make approximately 250 to 300 takeoff and landing per year for the last 10 years, average. So we are always in our job sites, we are always next to our clients, we are always listening very carefully, and more than that, we have a big respect for our clients, because, you know, it's their country. We are only a visitor for a temporary period of time. So we have to respect their rules, regulations, and do our best in order to create the difference among the other competitors like China, most of them state-owned companies. That's why we have to do it faster, with a higher quality, and with better engineering, design, and all added values. On top of that, we try to maximize the local content. So we want to utilize the maximum possible local labor, local materials, local resources, So, in many other competitors' job sites, you would not be able to see as many locals as we employ. So, and last but not the least, we try to invest in those countries which have given us opportunities. For instance, in Niger, for instance, in Senegal, for instance, in Rwanda. So it's not only taking a contract and making your profit and leaving. If you want to stay and be a permanent player, you have to also invest and be a part of that community. So these are probably the differences among the others.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. My last question to Junior and Husseini is related to home. As both companies' headquarters and in South Africa, I think let's go back to home to look at how South Africa is doing. I mean, both companies has been quite active in their solidarity to support government initiatives in South Africa. In South Africa, for our Turkish audiences, had a similar fund that government created whereby each organization contributed. They managed to raise more than $150 million towards $200 million for those contributions to utilize against COVID fight. And both Sanlam and Massmart has been quite active, and they contribute largely to these initiatives. Of course, South Africa, according to some of the economists, has been impacted very badly from an economy point of view, and it's been downgraded, as both of you know. And there are different views about how South Africa will come out of this process. Without saying much, I'll request firstly, let's say Husseini, then Junior, to share their opinion as how do they see South African economy responding to this, and considering also as South Africa currently the chairman of AU, therefore South Africa's decision and growth gets it influences other African countries as well as the chair of AU. Husseini?
Thank you very much, Salim, for that very important question. I would say one of the positive things out of this crisis is that it has made the South African private sector and the government to work that much closer together. I see more coordination, more joined up action, more collaboration. Even around the recovery plan, there are a lot of discussions that as the private sector, we are part of with the authorities, and they're more willing to listen to the private sector now than was the case maybe before the crisis. So I think that will help us deal with the legacy issues. As you rightly pointed out, COVID-19 became like a perfect storm because we had been downgraded by Moody's, and S&P also downgraded us. In addition to that, we were on a recession, so it was indeed a nail in the coffin. But that has really galvanized us to realize that we are in serious trouble, and therefore we've got to work together to emerge out of the crisis situation. Us as Massmart are playing a very active role. Together also my other organization, Aspen, we are fully engaged and fully plugged in all the activities that are geared towards rebuilding the South African economy and to expedite the recovery process. And that is something that has to happen with a great sense of agency, because we've seen unemployment rising, we're seeing companies struggling to survive. A lot of companies are not going to survive. Some are going to emerge being weaker, and they need a lot of assistance. And we need to see where new opportunities to create value and create new forms of industry and economic activity will be, so that we can create new jobs that are sustainable.
Thank you so much, Husseini. Junior, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. As Husseini indicates, the COVID outbreak found South Africa already in a fairly weak state. We were in a recession, and in short order, we were downgraded by Moody's to sub-investment grade. But as they say, never waste a crisis, or never let a crisis go to waste. I think what this crisis has managed to do is rally into a partnership, government, business, labor, and society at large, to pull together to address this challenge and work towards reviving the economy. Our group, Sanlam, with our major investor, we donated to the Solidarity Fund R1 billion, which is the equivalent of 60 million US dollars as a contribution. Other companies did the same. But again, the level of corporate citizenship has increased tremendously in the country. As a business, we take a view that we will not have a successful business in an unsuccessful South Africa. And our organization, together with others, are working hand in hand with the government in terms of finding solutions. I think what this crisis has also done, it has given the government a policy space to address some of the long-standing challenges, particularly with respect to some of our state-owned enterprises that were long overdue some restructuring. I think this has opened that policy space. Labor is also coming to the party in finding solutions, which is outstanding. And in closing, Salim, South Africa has a history of finding solutions in the most dire conditions. And I'm convinced that South Africa will do it once again in the face of COVID-19.
Thank you so much. I guess I could add that as somebody who has been living South Africa more than 15 years, South Africa's corporate culture is really admirable. And considering that a powerhouse and working together with government, I'm quite positive, and I agree with you guys that soon we will see the economy is picking up, and hopefully it will be much better than before. And without further ado, of course, I would like to request our president, Mr. Nail Olpak, to say a couple of words before we close this session. Mr. Olpak?
I believe everything has been said so far, and we also learned something, that we have a wonderful moderator here. So we are going to continue together with you. Thank you for everyone joining for this meeting, especially for our dear panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. I think it has been a great webinar for me as well. I learned many new things. So thank you so much for our guests to join us. I hope you have a wonderful day ahead. And I also would like to thank you, more than 100 participants who has been patiently listening to us, and good luck to them with their endeavors. Have a lovely day ahead.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Yes.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Since 1985, we have been pursuing business opportunities throughout the world by embracing this motto: more trade. Everything began with these two words. It was then that the Turkish private sector united to adopt a joint vision, and I was given my name. Well, who am I? I am a business platform that is empowered by my founding institutions, business councils, counterpart organizations, and members pursuing business opportunities all around the world, uniting all of my stakeholders. I am DEİK. DEİK has become the locomotive organization of our private sector. 2019, Recep Tayyip Erdoğan. Well, what do I do? Exports, imports, inward and outward investments, manufacturing, and so much more. I establish new bonds and relations through business forums, B2B meetings, roundtable meetings, conferences, panel discussions, and summits across the world. I have been vigorously striving to strengthen the dynamics of the economy, steering the world's wind of change, and enhancing interactions within the private sector. Hence, I generate major contributions to my members and to the private sector with the mission I carry. I reunite Turkish business people living all around the world under a common objective. With each passing day, people, countries, and even the continents come closer. The balances of international trade are rapidly changing, while the world economy is also being reshaped. I am not trying to keep pace with this change. I am steering this change because I consider trade not as an instrument of war, but as a tool of developing societies, glamorizing the world, and contributing to the advancement of technologies that preserve and protect nature. Therefore, I am Turkey's global horizon. I am carrying Turkey's strength to the world. Now it is time to act together. I want to make business with you through my 146 business councils. I am a business platform empowered by my members. Because our mission is business diplomacy.